This is the Troutbitten podcast.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Troutbitten.
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 Yeah, Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
It's about trout. Wild trout. This is Troutbitten.
This is the Troutbitten podcast, and thanks for tuning in. My name is Dominic Swantowski. I'm the owner of Troutbitten and the author of Troutbitten.com. So welcome back to the Blue Liners Bible, small stream fishing tactics, and some stories. This is episode 4, and we're ready to tackle nymphing on these small waters. Last time we spent the episode working through dry fly fishing strategies and adaptations for small streams. And we argued that dry fly fishing, those skills, are at the heart of this whole thing. Learn to fish dry flies and you set yourself up. You learn the necessary casting precision that you can transfer over to a nymphing game or to streamers, which may be an even bigger challenge than fishing dry flies in tight cover. So let's get to all of that in a moment. But first, let me introduce my co-host, the always agreeable Mr. Austin Dando.
Always.
Yeah.
Never disagree.
Hey, did you night fish last night? Did you go?
No, I night fished tonight, but
Oh, okay.
I night fished for striper last week.
Yeah, well, you want to tell everybody about
It
that?
counts.
It must be a setup if you're doing that well.
I've made
do
a friend
well.
down
Yeah.
at the beach, down in Cape May, New Jersey.
Yeah.
Frankie Del Vescovo. And
He's not Italian, is he?
yeah, just a little bit. He lives down there in the summer. His parents own a restaurant. And at night, after working, he goes out and trolls around the back bays for striper and
Nice.
does pretty well. So it was a good time. We caught maybe, I don't know, 5 each or something, three to 5 each. And it's just streamer fishing and getting really fast blow-ups, really reactionary strikes. But it's the most fun thing I do all year, I think.
That is. I could do
it's
that
pretty
for
tremendous.
a while and not get tired of it. That's cool.
Exactly.
And it's at night. You know, that's cool.
Yep.
Hey, do you ever night fish small streams around here?
Not really. And I was actually thinking about that more. There's some streams that I was just considering I should go to at night that may hold larger trout that are hard to come by during the daytime, especially
Yeah.
in summer conditions. And
Yeah.
it could be a good way to maybe lock into those fish. But I should do it more.
Yeah, I have very rarely done it. I have fished some of our main waters and, some of the upper areas where things are getting pretty tight. I've done that, and I've gone in because I've either caught or missed some big fish during the day at some point, and you go chasing them at night.
Right.
And I got to have some motivation to do that because I don't really enjoy it when things are extra tight. And it goes along with what we're talking about here. Brings me to this question, really. This one's from Robert Johnston through Instagram, not Robert Johnson.
Almost a blues musician here,
The original.
the immortal.
Yes. He says, hey, this Blue Liner series is a cool idea. Well, thanks, buddy. Very helpful. He says, learning a lot. You guys keep talking about small streams being full of obstacles, making it hard to cast. Most of my small waters aren't like that. And his question, would your techniques change if the small stuff was more open? What do you think?
All power to you. If your small streams aren't like that, to me, I think the root of what we're talking about, in my opinion, wouldn't change. Still aiming for those tight targets, staying somewhat stealthy. The way we've been talking about covering water and moving upstream, choosing your water correctly, all that stuff I think still applies. But man, if you have open casting lanes, have fun.
No, that's a fair point. I was thinking about it. I wanted to talk through this real quick because I agree with what you said there, that so much won't change.
So agreeable.
I agree with you too.
How could, yeah, I know. Anyhow. go on.
Anyway, so much won't change. I do feel like if the stream is smaller, and let's say it's at a lower level too, they're going to be extra spooky. So many of the changes that I make for small streams are because of two things. First, because I find the trout to be kind of extra spooky, and I got to be extra careful in those environments. Now, that's, again, we talked about the season that I often fish these small streams. Sometimes they are at their lowest level. The other thing that forces me to change, though, is that tight cover. And then all of a sudden, I am, doing some tactics that I might not even do in a larger stream, or doing them in a different way, right? We're going to talk here in a little bit about tight line nymphing. That's not something that I enjoy doing all that much in real tight cover, we're going to do it. We're going to
Yeah.
talk about it too. And yeah, I'm going to do it at times. The tighter it gets, the less I want to do that. So some things change. Absolutely. And like you said, more power to you. If you have the opportunity, then just do what works best. I don't know.
Yep.
I mean, that's how I always approach almost every fishing situation.
Sure
Do
thing.
what works best. I fish spinning rods and gear and stuff like that. When I bass fish, I was out on a lake with Aiden the other day on a kayak and having some fun. And I had a spinning rod in my hand because it made the most sense. I wasn't going to, take out 3 different weights or 3 different densities of sinking lines and stuff like that and try to force it, especially from a kayak. That's harder. All right, so let's do it. Nymphing on small waters. So let's talk first about dry dropper, mostly as a nymphing tactic, and then discuss indicator nymphing, and then finally tight line nymphing. I think those are all the different ways to do it, right, buddy? That's it.
Hold me to that.
The general headers.
Yeah, that's good.
Honestly, though, that is a lot to cover.
Yeah.
And this is a skills series, and we're, trying to work through things, but also keep it nice and tidy. We're going to help you out here by leading you to some existing Troutbitten resources, though, to kind of tie everything in. As I often like to point out, this Troutbitten project is big, and nothing here stands alone. There really are always multiple supporting resources for you that go deeper into whatever you're interested in that we're talking about. All it takes is a quick search. But for this podcast, I'll leave a number of those resource links in the show notes and in the companion article as well. We don't leave you hanging. We have a lot to go through tonight. And yeah, the supporting material is really going to matter. Austin, real quick, how often do you nymph a small stream? And why might you make that decision?
Yeah.
Right? Maybe let's address that.
Maybe a blanket statement, but I nymph a small stream the least often I have to. And the reason, because we talked about in the previous episode, just love fishing dry flies. But in instances where maybe a dry fly isn't getting it done, or I want to get to the bottom of a pool, if they're not always up on the surface, I'll put on a nymph. And that's sort of my first tactic in going subsurface before I might move into a streamer or something like that. But that's the reason I might fish one, but it's not my go-to.
Yeah, I agree with you. It isn't my favorite thing either. Just like, night fishing gives me a chance to do very different things. I really enjoy how much small stream fishing just kind of calls to me to fish dry flies, cover water, and have some fun doing that. I will force dry flies at them. I don't need to see any rises. I'll just prospect with dries as my first option. It's rare that I go out to a small stream and I think, all right, my first option here is I'm going to nymph. It really is. I'd rather fish streamers on a small stream than nymphs, usually. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, what you kind of said there is that you force dry flies. I do the same thing for the fact that when I'm on small streams, like that's what's fun to me. And we'll talk about it later, but if you go dry dropper, you go tight line rig, everything changes in the presentation. And sometimes those presentations are not ideal to make in small streams that have a lot of cover that aren't wide open. And to your point about streamer fishing is, it's really fun because you can control the depth and the drop and the speed of a streamer on a small stream, sometimes much easier than you can on a dry dropper or tight line rig in small streams because of what you're limited to in casting distance, but also how close you can get to the fish. So it's fun to be able to just throw a streamer far up and drift it as slowly or as fast or as high or as low as you want and have a little bit more of that control back in your hands.
Yeah, and they'll eat a streamer in so many different ways. You don't have to be so attentive to trying to get your dead drift. For me, nymphing, yes, when I'm nymphing on a small stream, I still need a dead drift. That's my baseline. And luckily, they're often a little more forgiving, if you're lucky, about that quality of drift. So you can get away with pretty good dead drift, whereas in a lot of larger streams, more pressured waters, things like that, they are more selective about the quality of that drift. However, like I said, with that streamer, a little easier. No, I think it's a lot easier to get a quality presentation, Drag all of a sudden is part of the presentation.
Yeah.
Moving it through, following the line, you know what I mean? So we'll talk about streamers next week. But one of the things we both agree about is that we like to fish dry so much that we'll kind of force it. I like what you said. You'll sometimes add a nymph to the dry in an area where you know that there's some fish in there. Maybe there's a nice fish in there. And okay, that fish will not come up to the top. You've given them a couple dry fly presentations. And that's a really easy thing to do, we all think, to add the nymph, and there you go, dry dropper. So let's talk about that. I promised this at the end of the podcast last week. when I said that dry fly episode was not about dry dropper. Now, I wanted to mention that because I said one of the most common myths in fly fishing is like, oh, hey, let's just add a nymph under the dropper. Double our chances. What can go wrong, right? Everything's going to be great. Put the nymph on there. You got a nymph and a dry. They can eat the dry up top, the nymph underneath. And
Yeah.
it's a very common misconception to me. Everything does change when you add that nymph. You brought it up a minute ago.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. And maybe the first thing is just the precision and the accuracy that you have with a single dry, where nothing besides the weight of the line and the leader and the dry fly is what you're in control of. And the moment you add an additional weight or hinge point to that dry fly cast, well, a couple things change. First, now you have to not only line up a dry fly in a certain lane, you have to get the nymph to land directly behind it and track correctly. And if you want to fish tight to the bank, well, now you can put that dry fly essentially as close as you can get the nymph to the bank, especially if you're casting on an angle and you can't get the nymph to kick over and the dry to land in front of it and all that. Right. So you get limited there too on how tight to the cover you're able to get.
Right.
Also, too, you're sacrificing something, which we've talked about in the skill series on dry dropper before, but you have to choose whether or not you're going to get that good dry fly drift and the nymph is just along for the ride, or if what we're talking about here is, well, I'm going to try to catch him on the nymph because I can't get him on the dry.
Yeah.
Well, then your dry presentation is going to suffer, and you have to accept that. And oftentimes you have to maybe use a larger dry than you want or a more buoyant fly than you'd prefer to be able to get to the bottom of some of those deeper pools. So you have to decide what you're going for and adjust accordingly. And when you're working up small streams that are always changing in depth, that's another thing that gets in the way because your rigging will have to change. You take it off, put it on, take it off, adjust the depth.
Yeah.
A fixed approach doesn't work.
Yeah. Very blanket statement, Austin. It doesn't work. Never try it.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, I'm with you.
Not sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I think you highlighted everything that changes and makes it so really inefficient and often ineffective. I think it can be very frustrating because you think like, oh, good, I'm going to fish up top and below. Well, neither one are drifting all that great. So Troutbitten listeners already know the crew's favorite beer is Broken Heel's Hazy IPA from New Trail Brewing Company. But our friends at New Trail are hard at work developing our next favorites. Each one is like a different fly pattern because some fit your current situation better than others. Like this one they call 24/7 because it's the beer we could drink 365, crafted to go anywhere, anytime. 24/7's light body and low alcohol make it a must-have when you've got day-long plans but still want full IPA flavor. Then there's Trail Marker West Coast IPA, inspired by classic pine and orange flavor. Trail Marker is brilliantly clear, nicely bitter, and available in two varieties, West Coast IPA and Imperial IPA. You can bet the Troutbitten crew will mix these styles into the cooler with Broken Heels. So check out newtrailbrewingcompany.com to find retailers near you or on the way to the river. Tactical Fly Fisher was founded by Fly Fishing Team USA angler Devin Olson to bring anglers cutting-edge gear and techniques inspired by the World Fly Fishing Championships. Tactical Fly Fisher's goal is to supply you with the latest and best fly fishing gear and to help you learn how to use it through their videos and books. Whether you need flies, fly tying supplies, a new rod or reel, or any other fly fishing equipment, they've got you covered. Check them out at tacticalflyfisher.com and use the code TB15 to get 15% off one order, excluding rods, reels, waders, and boots. Visit tacticalflyfisher.com. Things do change a lot, and I want to adapt and be versatile and get to them. I will say sometimes that dry dropper approach is a great approach, and that is a fun way to fish. So what we're talking about here, what you're mentioning, especially Austin, the downfalls, especially applied to what we call standard dry dropper. And at Troutbitten, we're often accused of complicating things, and we kind of do. But fishing's complicated. It is. If you want to approach the fish the way they need to be approached, it's not a simple thing. It isn't as easy as dropping a nymph below a dry fly. So really, we've separated dry dropper into three styles in the past, and we all talk about this now. We're talking about standard dry dropper, which is, and I'm going to do this real quick, adding a weighted nymph underneath a dry fly. kind of your standard way to do it. A weighted nymph. Now you have, 10 centigrams, at least a 2 millimeter bead, something like that probably, right? And that weighted nymph then takes the slack with it. You were trying to build up nice slack to the dry fly, no matter how short your leader was. You still needed slack to the dry so that it would drift well. All of a sudden, you add any weight in any kind of nymph or a split shot, and that weight wants to keep going. And it takes that slack that you were building up, takes it with it, which is another thing that makes adding a nymph not necessarily ideal. So that's what we call standard dry dropper, and that's one of the downsides of it. But it's great too, can be. We're going to go through that. What we call light dry dropper is adding a nymph that weighs basically nothing. No bead, no split shot to the system. A very small nymph that doesn't even hold any water weight, not a whole lot of material to hold water, And so it hardly, if at all, affects the dry fly presentation. It doesn't take that slack with it. It's a lot of fun to fish. Real small wet fly, little RS2, something like that.
Nice.
Those are kind of my favorites. It's a fun way to fish. However, the things you talked about where it's taken away some of your accuracy next to structure, next to the bank, those still apply. Those are still the downfalls. And the third way that we fish dry dropper, that third style, is what we call tight line dry dropper. It's essentially taking a mono rig, a tight line system, and fishing a dry fly on the tippet. We're going to get to that here at the end, right? And I really enjoy that style. So about 2 years ago, we did a full podcast skill series on those three styles. I encourage you to revisit those styles for a very thorough review of the three types of dry dropper. There are dedicated articles on the Troutbitten site as well, regardless of whether you're on a small stream or the Missouri River. The principles, the differences in these styles remain, and I think it'll be very helpful to understand them. Go check out those resources. So let's assume that most times when people add a nymph under the dry on small streams, they're talking about standard dry dropper. And that's kind of what we're addressing here. Mostly standard, right? So you're going to have some weight on a nymph that you put under the dry. And there's problems and then there's advantages too. So how's it work, Austin? How do you run this rig? You want to real quickly talk about leader, rod, line? We should. Does anything change? Yeah. If you know that you're going to spend most of your day, or at least you plan on wanting to be prepared for that standard dry dropper, is there anything you're going to do different with your gear?
Sure. Same rod and line and all that, but where things might change is the leader. We're talking about the small stream leader here that generally I terminate at 4X or 5X depending on the small stream.
Okay.
Now that may change and may cut some of that 4 or 5X back and terminate at 3X if I'm fishing a really air resistant fly that's prone to twist. If that's my goal, that's specifically for a standard dry dropper where we're going to need a buoyant fly. But other than that, usually depending on the style of fly and the style and size of the fly, I'm putting a foot or two of tippet, usually tied off the bend of the dry fly for myself when I'm doing the standard dry dropper. Again, we're going to have to surrender to the fact that we're looking for a nymph drift in this instance. And when I do tie on a nymph, usually it's because, again, I'm not getting eats on a dry. So my purpose and my mission is to try to pick up fish on nymphs. So I'm looking for a clean nymph drift. And just like when you're tight line nymphing, you want your point fly to go in, you want your tag fly to go in the water, and to both land in the same seam and track through the whole drift and come out in the same seam. Well, the same concepts apply for standard dry dropper. Dry dropper in general, we want our dry fly to land, our nymph to land directly upstream and track through the same seam all the way through the drift so they're not fighting one another or putting unnatural presentations out there.
That's a good point. I think almost nobody that I talk to anyway really seems to think about that much. They kind of throw the dry dropper out there and wherever things land, that's where they land. That's a hard enough thing to do on a regular size stream. Yeah. That's even harder when you have limited casting room and casting range and everything.
That's so true.
It's a tough thing.
Yep.
But that's the only way you're really going to get a true dead drift if you have real currents to a stream. It is tough. So I'd say I approach it the same as you. I don't change leaders. I'm still using my small stream leader. And then that terminal tippet could very well change. I might go 3X to the number 12 PMX fly. Parachute Madam X is one of my favorites.
Nice.
If I really need that buoyancy. You've said a couple times about a buoyant fly. I can often get away with a number 14 Parachute Adams if, I'm only dropping a 16 bead head pheasant tail underneath, It has a 2.5 millimeter bead.
Yeah. Some of that depends on current speed too, right? It
sure does. That's exactly what I was going to say. If the currents aren't going to swamp the dry.
Yeah.
And if I'm good at mending. And I think
Right on.
mending really, it's again undervalued, perhaps,
Sure.
to really get great drifts on a dry. And now with dry dropper, we're going to have to mend quite a bit. The faster the water, the more I usually need to mend. Again, this applies to regular streams, but often it's as soon as the dry hits, I'm mending, throwing a little slack here, throwing a little slack there. I'm still only going to get that 4, 6, 8, maybe 10-foot drift. And then I'm casting back out, one back cast, back in. When the water's more subtle, though, if I'm approaching a hole, just a sweet spot up there where the water's not moving too fast, I'm going to stay back further. I'm going to cast longer and really try to set everything up so that I don't need to mend. I find that over mending in the subtle kind of water, the slow stuff, it'll hurt you.
And sometimes we're not having to worry about some of the fastest water and subtle water when we're talking about fishing holes, especially. Where we're waiting, maybe making that cast and then letting the nymph sink into the depths of that spot. Yeah. And often I'll make that cast, and like even if the dry is maybe going to be prone to drag, like that drift is going to be short anyhow. And I'm just waiting in the meantime for that nymph to drop through the current, and it's going to be over before I know it. Yeah. So I'm doing very limited mending because the drift is short, and my main goal is just get the nymph to the bottom and give the trout a chance to see it and a chance to eat it before I cast again. It doesn't always need to be perfect, right?
Right. I'll often set up that kind of situation with a good tuck cast.
Right on.
You know what I mean? So the whole leader extends, the nymph is all the way out to the end. It can't go out anymore, so it tucks down in, and it's going down in kind of hard. The dry fly will then land kind of right on top of where the nymph went in, so the nymph gets its chance to fall.
I'd say that I think that's something that's also overlooked, the idea that you can throw a tuck while doing dry dropper. Oh, yeah. Whether that's standard or tight line. Yeah. But right. I think the concept of a tuck cast there is absolutely in play, where you can still have the same effect where you kind of stop hard on the forward cast, allow that slack to spring back, the nymph to drop down without any tension, the dry to land right on top. Yeah. And then you've got that really nice sweet spot of time there before you may encounter any drag. Yeah. That's a good call out.
Well, I feel like the tuck cast is what gives me accuracy over that placement that you were talking about earlier. Yep. That's how I will try to do it most often. The other option is to kind of get everything to lag enough and get it, really it's a lag and curve kind of idea. And you can get the leader's going to hit, the dry fly's going to hit, and then that nymph will go out and ahead of or upstream of the dry. There's a lot of different ways to do it. Again, I direct everybody to those resources. Understand what you're trying to do. Like you said, Austin, you kind of have to choose. Am I going standard dry dropper, light dry dropper? What am I really trying to do here? What we're talking about here is with this standard dry dropper approach, it's a nymphing approach. You said that earlier. I will say when I've had some really nice days. I can remember on, which is a stream that I grew up fishing. I fish it almost every year just to go back, just for old time's sake, right? Cool. I've had some really, really nice days there. I feel like some of my pivotal moments with dry dropper in general were on that stream. And my rig was something like, it was a parachute something, probably a 12 or a 14 parachute Adams. I use that so much. This is, 25 years ago. And I had, I do know, I had a pheasant tail underneath. I either went a size 14 or a size 16 beadhead pheasant tail. Simple. Nice. And I started out mostly with just like a foot back, maybe 14, 15, 16 inches back. That's it. And we've been talking here about adjustment and needing to, adjust adjustment in the cast too with alignment and maybe adding length. I went hours without having to do any of that. The stream was pretty low. Nice. And the one thing I thought about adjusting the most was going to a smaller fly. I think I started out with a 14, went to a 16 just so I wouldn't touch as much. It just wasn't a problem getting the fish to eat. They ate both the dry and the nymph. They probably ate the nymph 2-to-1. And I'm fishing upstream. Things were pretty simple. And I was like, oh, this is what dry dropper is supposed to be like. And it was one of those days for me.
Pretty efficient.
Yeah. And well, I don't know if you're like me, but when I go back there, I want to repeat that success. It just makes me think of it. Oh yeah, I remember.
Like a tradition.
I almost go right back to the dry dropper really as the first option instead of just pure dry. That's cool. If nothing else, I'm ready to add that dropper really quickly. So if I keep it simple like that, and if the fish will be willing, I find it's a very fun way to fish. I get a lot of reaction strikes. As soon as the rig lands, they eat either the nymph or the dry, and I'm just working upstream, just moving around the next corner and the next undercut. When it works, it is fluid and a lot of fun. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great stuff.
So a lot of this stuff we're talking about here with standard dry dropper can really be directly applied to indicator nymphing. Almost everything we just mentioned there really transfers pretty well to indicator nymphing on small streams. So if you find yourself really wanting to adjust the dry to nymph distance a lot, if it isn't working out like I was just talking about, and you feel like, oh, I got to get deeper, man, I bet they would have eaten if it really could have had some more depth. Or if you're just wanting to change things a lot, or if the water is too much and swamping your dry, no matter what you put on there, throw the indicator. I pretty much use the same rig. I might have a little bit more length on the piece of tippet that I'm going to slide the indicator on. Maybe have 2 feet of slidability, 1 to 2 feet, right? That's the point, is I want to be able to slide the Indy. That's the main reason I'll use it, so I can adjust more up and down and up and down. If it's a cold time of the year and they just aren't eating the dry at all, I'm like, well, why don't I just move to the indicator?
Yeah, and I think the yarn is a good call out there, specifically the Dorsey yarn indicator that we've all come to know and love. And the great thing about it is it's so subtle when it lands, right?
Yeah.
And we're not talking about throwing hard indicators like thingamabobbers.
Mm-hmm.
But when you can cast these at a distance, they land, they don't make a big shock wave, they don't spook many fish, and then they just drift really softly. So I love them too for the same reasons that you mentioned, with to be able to adjust really quickly.
Yeah.
You can slide them up and down, but also it's just a really nice stealthy presentation.
Yeah, and fishing yarn doesn't really change the cast. Don't use any more yarn than you need. And it's going to feel, well, just like your dry fly, almost exactly like the dry fly. That's why I pretty much use the same rig.
Yep.
I'm with you. I'm really going to avoid that thingamabobber, the hard indicator kind of thing, until I guess I have to. It's not like I've never used them in a small stream. But that'd be an unusual situation. I don't know.
Right. I'd say around me or around us, it's less common to have to use a hard indicator. Somewhere out west that may have deeper undercuts or longer drifts available to you. Yeah, I could see myself going to that, but not necessarily around here.
Yeah, for me, the main advantage of the yarn is that it's enjoyable still to I still get to keep my dry fly casting form.
Yep.
Same thing I was doing with the standard dry dropper for the most part.
Right.
And yeah, you can amend and do all the things. It
eliminates that hinge though that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, right.
If similar to the hinge of the dry fly on a standard dry dropper, if you have something that has any substantial weight or influence in the cast, like a thingamabobber, it's another item that you have to adjust for in your presentation, in your casting stroke. With the yarn indicator, as you mentioned, it's just like a normal dry fly cast. There's not a lot of influence that yarn has on the position of the leader. Yeah.
And I rarely find a situation where the yarn won't support what I need to throw. I mean, if we're talking bead sizes again, I'm hardly ever going to need more than a 4 millimeter bead. And much more often, I'm going to need a 2.5 or a 3 millimeter bead to get all of the water that fish are sitting in.
Yeah.
Since 2010, Smith Creek has designed innovative guide tough gear for serious anglers. Introducing the new Fly View chest pack system, Smith Creek's most advanced accessory yet. Built from marine-grade aluminum and lightweight PE foam, the Fly View is rugged, modular, and made to keep up with you on the water. Fly View's lid features a built-in 3x Fresnel magnifier, giving you a clearer view when you're tying on fine tippet, especially if your eyesight isn't quite what it used to be. With 5 swappable tray styles and an external lid patch with a magnetic fly holder, the Fly View chest pack can comfortably hold well over 100 flies, all in easy reach. Spend less time tying and more time casting with Fly View. Visit them online at smithcreek.co for more information. So I want to tell you about Tajima Direct. They make the best polarized lenses on the market. Tajima gives me perfectly clear vision and more detail with less eye strain, so I see more fish. The process is simple. Take a pair of your sunglasses and send them in to Tajima. In short order, you'll get your frames back with your choice of lens tints that are specifically designed for fly fishing. With both prescription and non-prescription, Tajima's patented lens technology results in the best lenses I've ever worn, including every top brand out there. So I wear polarized lenses all day, every day, on the water. And I've been rotating in Tajima's brown 15 green mirror for average light days and their yellow-green 40 silver mirror for the cloudy low-light days that I love to fish. I can tell you that for me, having Tajima's prescription lenses in the right lens tints has been a game changer. I put my glasses on and I don't think about them again until the end of the trip. Send in your own frames today. Visit tajima-direct.com. That's TAJIMA-direct.com. Upgrade your lenses and see what you've been missing. I do find that one thing that I really just can't get under an indicator is the same thing I can get with, let's say, light dry dropper. Light dry dropper, again, let's say I just use a number 16 wet fly. I mean, soft hackle wet. That weighs almost nothing. And so it doesn't affect my dry fly when I'm doing that. And I'm not quite sure why, but if I try putting that under even a very small bit of yarn, it doesn't work the same. And now that I'm saying it out loud, it might be because when I put yarn on, I'm kind of giving up on the idea that I'm going to be creating a whole lot of good slack to the yarn in the cast. I don't know. I do change my tippet section to kind of support that yarn or to be able to have things be more slidable. What I ought to do is just take my dry fly off and put the yarn right there.
Yeah.
On the end of that 4X tippet or whatever. And right? And then
build in the slack and see what it does.
Yeah.
I mean,
because
it should do the same thing, right?
Right.
There's got to be something that you're putting or influencing to make it perform differently.
Yeah. Once again, we get back to the just fact that so much of good fly fishing is about slack. Giving slack to a dry fly, giving slack to a nymph, some grace to a nymph, giving slack to an indicator so you don't bump it, so you don't move it, so that it in turn then doesn't move the nymph. And it's the buildup and then management of good slack. That's where success really comes in.
Right on. All right, so let's move into the next tactic then. That would be tight line nymphing.
Yeah.
And like we were saying, I think this is one of the most challenging things to do on a small stream.
Yeah.
Talking about overhead cover, we're talking about tight quarters. It can be really challenging. But if you can get this right, if you have the right setup of circumstances and conditions, it can be really effective. And, for myself at least, again, it's the kind of the mantra of a small stream. I like fishing fly line. I like fishing a standard leader.
Okay.
And the ones around me, so what I do, I don't necessarily change to a regular mono rig. And if I go to a tight line approach, it's usually because dry flies aren't working.
Yeah.
But what I've done recently is I've sort of built a sighter section with tippet coming off of it that I can use interchangeably off of my main leader.
Oh, yeah.
Now, when I'm saying this, I'm assuming I'm going to be getting pretty short casts and short presentations.
Yeah.
But what I'll do is I'll take my standard small stream dry fly leader, and then I've got a piece of, I don't know, maybe 1.5 feet of cider material, and I've got a tippet ring on each end of it. And I'll tie that cider material directly to the end of my dry fly leader.
Yeah.
And then I'll add on whatever tippet I'm going to be using to nymph. And I do that because generally I'm not casting to a length that has the fly line out of the rod tip, and I can go back and forth pretty quickly. That's what I've been messing with lately. Now, I've fished mono rigs on small streams exclusively a lot, but this is something that I've been working on and I've been enjoying, just the efficiency of it.
That's cool. I do a similar thing, and I'll use the Harvey Gold leader for that. And the idea
that would be good too.
Yeah, the idea of that leader for me is I can do a bunch of different things with it. I store sections like what you're talking about on a small rigging foam. How do you, when you take it off, you put it on a rigging foam?
Yeah, it's the small ones, like you said, the not the standard size, but sort of that like an inch to maybe 2 inches in diameter, and then just store it away because it's maybe 4 feet in length.
That's cool. It keeps you flexible. One of the things I don't like about that is you end up with knots in the guides. Leader knots, I mean, in the guides. And the transition from
you could.
fly line. Yeah. Well, it depends on how long everything is. But often, at least the transition, the nail knot or the Owego clinch knot to the loop, the fly line loop. I don't like any of that in the guides. And it can change the presentation a little bit if it skips and speed bumps, you call it, when it's in the guides. Yep. It's not perfect, right? I mean, you acknowledge that.
No, it's not perfect. And it is a compromise to be just more efficient on the streams when I'm not making, let's say, long distance nymphing presentations or something of that nature. It's usually it's not a fixed amount of line, but it's the length of the leader out of the guides, or a little bit of it inside the guides, as you mentioned. So something
you're still
to deal
pretty
with.
close.
Yeah.
You can do a lot when you're close. So for me, I usually, if I'm going to spend any real time, half hour or more, I'm switching over to a standard mono rig. If I'm going to nymph.
I like that. Yeah.
If I'm going to tight line nymph, probably even less than a half hour. If I'm going to do it for 20 minutes or 15, I don't know, find your number. Because it's just a much more elegant system. I'm not dealing with two different things, both fly line and leader. I'm not having knots in the guides. And I feel like I'm pretty good with cast. And I also enjoy the challenge, which I'm telling you, I think it's very challenging to cast a mono rig in close quarters. I also would like to have a longer rod if I know that that's what I'm going to do. If I'm going out to a small stream in the winter, I really don't expect much action on top. And I'm talking about northern winters, not southern winters. Okay. And, if I know that I'm going out there, I'll use an 8.5, 9-foot rod, honestly. Usually a 9-foot rod. I don't want to take a 10.5 out in small streams, although you could. So that's where my gear choice might even change a little bit. But the fact that I want to have that ability to switch over to a mono rig and tightline nymph is one of the reasons that I choose the rod that I do. 8.5 foot rod, usually 7.5 is about as short as I'll go. We've been doing this series for 3 weeks now, and I've got a lot of people. Everybody loves to talk about the rods. Lots of people are like, "Oh, I like a 6-foot rod. I like a fiberglass 7-foot rod. I like this and that." Everybody's going to have their rod choices. Yeah. But I do wonder if you're taking a 6-foot rod out there. If you'd be willing or even effective to be if you're switching over to a tightline rig, you kind of need that ability to keep more line off the water.
It reminds me of a story that Joe Humphreys will tell, where him and George Harvey were out fishing a small stream one day. Yeah. And they were fishing the same fly, the same leader, the same water, but Harvey caught much more than Joe did. And Joe couldn't figure out what the difference was. He's thinking, I'm fishing the same flies, got the same leader, presentation looks pretty good. And they get back to the car at the end of the day. And Harvey's whole thing is, well, you're fishing a 7-foot rod and I'm fishing an 8.5 foot rod. And the whole thing that he explained to Joe was, I always will use the longest rod I can get away with, not the shortest one. So I think that just reminds me of what you're saying there. If you're going to be nymphing or doing a certain tactic that is better with a longer rod, if you can get away with it, use it.
Yeah. I have had guys emailing me, I take 2 rods out there. I'm like, not
not saying to do that, but you could.
That could limit you too. Anyway, so there's a lot of different kind of mono rigs these days. And just to be clear, I almost always use the standard mono rig for me, which is a 20-pound butt section. I use it a lot because it preserves the ability for what I'll call traditional fly casting style.
It's better in that quarter.
You can actually cast
tight cover.
Cast it. We've been over this 100 times. You can cast it like a fly line if you treat it that way. Good, tight loops. And that matters because the other options, if you're using a micro rig or just like all 5X or something, then what you're left with is you have to water haul below you. Try finding the room that you need in a lot of situations to water haul. Or there's logs behind you and stuff, Or you're going to have bigger, more open loops, and you're really going to be lobbing line around. You cannot punch a micro rig through the air and under limbs and things like that like you can the standard. It's where, again, some foundational things happened for me in my understanding of fly fishing and different styles on small streams. And I remember how hard it was to nymph small waters this way. And I was trying to tightline it, And then I finally just had a couple days, and I was up on tributaries of the where it all kind of came together for me. And it's like I stopped being afraid to make the casts. And I went here and here, tight casting strokes, and I was young. And from that point forward, I understood how that mono rig really could cast like a fly line. Treat it that way, right? Don't use the weight. Don't be just thinking, I'm going to throw this weight or I'm going to lob this weight around. Use the line to push that fly.
Yeah, and it's all the more reason to be really deliberate in the delivery of the cast too. We talk about bossing stuff around sometimes. When you finish that cast, point the rod tip where you want it to go, and use some force. Don't be afraid. You don't have to baby it in there. Oftentimes things go wrong when you do that, especially on a tight line rig. Like, punch it in and trust that it's going to go where you've told it to.
Full turnover behind you, feel it tug on the rod tip, then go forward. Full turnover on the forward cast is going to equal a tuck cast. Fly goes out, then it tucks down in under your control. Tuck casts are not always vertical straight down in. The idea is you get to decide what angle it's going to go in at, what speed it's going to go in with, and how much slack you're actually delivering to the system. Anyway, tuck cast it in, get your contact, get a great drift. There's a lot of resources on Troutbitten that'll lead you to more understanding of what good tightlining really is. It would be silly to try to get into those details here. We've done it in so many other places. But just like on regular sized waters, you want to know what your choices are too. When that fly gets in there, are you just trying to track the nymph's progress? Like once it's in the water, how are we fishing it? Are you just doing tracking, or are you physically leading the flies on purpose? We've talked about that. Go look that up too. I promise I'll leave some resources on the difference really between tracking and leading. It all matters. These are not dumb trout, but they can be a little more eager to eat, often because of the infertility of the water.
Yeah, and kind of the common theme here, again, is the short-range tactic.
Yeah.
Some of these other tactics we've talked about where it's keeping distance, spooky fish, this and that, this is a little different. We're talking about getting into a rod's length distance from these fish and presenting nymphs. And that can be really challenging, but it can be done. And when you want a little bit more distance, what I like to do, you probably like to do it too, Dominic, is to float the sighter. Cast up, and again, if you have one fly on or two flies on, get that sighter material to lay down on the water and the nymphs to fall directly behind it. You can grease it up so it floats well, and then you're going to get some short drifts. So you're going to allow the grace or the slack that may or may not exist much within that tippet to have a chance to drift through and over those trout that you're targeting. And by the time, let's say, the nymphs take up the slack that's in between you and the sighter, it's probably time to pick up and cast again anyhow.
Anyway, yeah.
So it's a great way to make stealthy nymph drifts on a tight line rig without having to add indicators.
And we've talked before about how when we're floating the sighter, we're using it more as a placeholder than an actual suspension device.
Absolutely.
And you made good points there. That's exactly how I'd fish it. One thing I'll add, you said we're a rod length away. That's minimum for me. I'm going to be a rod length away. 2 rod lengths away, I can still get good tight line drifts. And if I have to go more than 2.5 rod lengths away, especially if I'm at 3 now, I'm talking about from where my feet are. So if I'm talking about 30 feet away, you're going to need to float the sighter. I think you can feel it out. You could tell, my leader is starting to sag a little too much. Just lay the line down.
Yep. The fish will tell you too. Like sometimes they'll be, again, like I said earlier, it doesn't always have to be perfect. Sometimes those fish are a little bit more apt to eat some drifts that are a little funnier. Yeah. And sometimes they're not. So you'll find out.
Yeah. So that standard monorig tight line game is very much a, let's say, short range system. 1 to 2 rod lengths away. 2.5, you're starting to push it. 3, you're starting to have to adapt by floating the sighter. Or just go back to that standard dry dropper. Like we're talking, change the leader, get back on the Harvey or the small stream version, and go back to dry dropper. Now, the one thing I do a lot before I would go back to dry dropper is probably the last thing we should address, Austin. Tight line, dry dropper, right? We're already on the mono rig, we're saying. Got to get a little further away. Or you see a couple rises up there, you're like, oh, maybe they would eat up top, Throw the dry fly back on. Now, where are we putting the dry fly? You want to explain that rig a little bit?
Yeah, so for myself, if I'm fishing a standard tightline nymph rig, oftentimes I'm going to have 2 flies on, or I'm going to be set up to fish 2 flies, whether or not I have both of them on, but I'll have a tag up above my point fly. And in tightline dry dropper situations, I like to put the dry fly on that tag, and then my nymph down below on the point, of course.
Sure.
And when we talk about this tactic, so when we make the cast, right, and the dry fly lands, the nymph lands right below it. And we're taking up, for the most part, most of any line that may be on the water. And we're trying to get tight to that fly. And what allows us to do is get a little bit more distance if we want it out of a dry fly cast or out of a nymphing cast. We don't have to mend nearly like we would have to do on a standard dry dropper because, well, there's no mass really out of the guides, and there's no fly line on the water. So normally...
No leader even on the water.
Yeah, and if there's a very small amount that you're picking back up as it comes to you to reduce any influence that you're having. Now, you still need to be at a medium distance, we could call it, but you choose your setups for this.
Since 2006, Yeti has been building products for anglers who fish hard and share an addiction for the woods and the water. Yeti changed the industry with their legendary coolers by featuring rugged but simple designs built to last for generations and stand up to whatever Mother Nature might bring. Yeti now takes that same functional and elegant design to everything in their lineup, from soft coolers to drinkware, bags, and more. Introducing the Easy Access Ranchero Backpack. It's the latest to join Yeti's lineup of tough-as-nails bags, and it's another part of my fishing gear that keeps me organized and ready on the water. The Ranchero Backpack features a cutting-edge rip-zip opening, so you can quickly tear the bag open to see the gear you need in just seconds. With smart internal organization, there's no more digging through your backpack for tippet spools or fly boxes. And for even more convenience, a handy vertical zipper allows you to grab gear at the bottom without having to unpack from the top. Get in, get out, and get going. Check out the Ranchero line of backpacks at yeti.com or find them at a Yeti retailer store near you. Yeah, it really is one of my favorite ways to fish in any water. I've said before, it's my favorite style of dry dropper. It's one of my favorite things to do on the water. I really enjoy it because obviously they might eat the dry. And when they eat that dry, you are in touch immediately. Yep. You kind of see yeah, it is fast. It is. I'll say my casting stroke doesn't change. It's still a nymphing casting stroke, which for me is very much like my dry stroke, but nice. I think you get the point out there. And I'm emphasizing then that weight, feeling the tug on the back cast, and then feeling the tug on the forward cast. Nymph goes in first, dry should lay down second. That's the way I do it. And I have then ultimate placement of where the nymph goes and where the dry goes. So I think that casting really matters. Once again, it so often comes down to casting, no matter what style of fly fishing we're doing. And especially here in small streams, we've said kind of over and over that it really will teach you the right things to wherever you end up fishing in the future. If you can be really good and comfortable on small streams with now a variety of tactics, dry flies, and now nymphs in 3 or 4 different ways we're talking about here. Yeah. You really have something to take anywhere else. Everything else is going to seem, everything else is going to be like child's play. Anything else, Austin?
Yeah, I think your point there of making sure that the nymph lands first and then the dry is something to maybe come back and touch on again. And because I agree with that, we're talking about tuck cast, we're talking about positioning, getting flies to line up. It's really hard to do that and get a good drift when your dry fly lands first, starts moving, and then you deliver, or the nymph lands afterwards.
Yeah.
And you've already taken away some of the slack or some of the drag-free presentation you're hoping to give that nymph. And if you were hoping for that nymph to dive down into the water column like you would hope on a tuck cast, well, you're not really going to get that because now you're drifting under tension.
Yeah.
The other thing that it can do is, and this takes a little bit of practice, but when you make the cast and you can land the nymph first, just like a tuck cast, like a standard cast maybe that we're hoping to do here, you have a moment there where you can manipulate the direction that the dry fly goes and lands. So when that nymph lands, it acts as a momentary anchor, I consider it, that allows you to manipulate the dry fly to fall within the same lane. So you can do that with an aerial mend or a move of the rod tip through the leader, but you can really set things up right away from the beginning if that nymph goes in the water first. So yeah, keep that in mind.
That's a cool way to put it. And that's in a split second, really.
Yeah, it is.
And it takes some anticipation through the cast. And you're about
and it can be hard on small streams, but you can do it.
Exactly. That's why I do want a rod that has some power to be able to push that nymph down in there with the tuck cast and still have momentum to push that dry fly. Momentum in the leader. We're just talking about casting a leader, not the fly line at this point. Right. That's why I need power in the rod. It's so important to me. Yeah, and everybody out there is going to have their own preferences and things like that. We're just telling you our preference. But there's a reason kind of behind everything that we choose to do anyway. And there's kind of a full system here for different ways to nymph on these small streams.
Yeah.
All right. There it is, nymphs on small streams. So do not forget the companion resources for all of this. We tried here to highlight the differences and the changes we make to adapt to small water, because the full details about all these nymphing styles are very well laid out in hundreds of articles on the Troutbitten website, seasons of material on the Troutbitten podcast, and in many, many videos on Troutbitten YouTube. Again, your key to all of this is here in the show notes and in the companion article for this podcast on the website. So I want to point out that both Austin and I really enjoy nymphing small streams. I know we kind of keep referring to how we prefer dry flies, but I also love a full day of nymphing or throwing streamers. It's pretty easy to sink into a rhythm with the tactic, cover water, and just be thankful to be immersed in the beauty of a small stream. I may not like it as much as pure dry fly fishing, but that doesn't matter much once I'm out there. More importantly, what do you enjoy the most? What motivates you to put in the effort to find these waters and fish them in the first place? That's what matters most. Hey, next time with the streamer episode, we'll talk about targeting bigger trout in these waters, and we'll talk about the crossover style of fishing that we didn't mention here. It's part nymphing, part streamer fishing. The crossover is something I use a lot when fishing small streams. It's a lot of fun, and it can really turn over some bigger trout. All right, Austin, let's hear the readout.
Okay, so remember, the Troutbitten Project is a free resource for all anglers. The Troutbitten website hosts over 1,500 articles, videos, and podcasts with endless stories, commentaries, tactics, tips, and more. Find what you like through the top menu and through the search page. Navigate by way of the categories and the tags, too. Be sure to find the Troutbitten YouTube channel, now featuring the Troutbitten Tip Series, Fly Fishing the Mono Rig, and the Troutbitten Fly Box, all in collaboration with Wilds Media. You'll also find the fish and film videos and the new Riverside series, all in their own playlist on Troutbitten YouTubes.
Oh, YouTubes.
Thank you for listening to the Troutbitten Podcast. Please give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave a comment because it really helps. Till next time, friends, fish hard, enjoy the day, and find your life on the water. On the water.
Ready?
Yes, let's go.